Hello, everybody. Aw, that's awesome. So how is the series of events? I want to say event been, but it's like 250 events this week. Is that right? Something insane like that? Have you guys been going to many things? Yes? Yes? Good? Awesome. So before I get started, I kind of want to know a little bit about you. So how many of you are currently attempting to start a company that either you founded or that you're a very early employee of? Okay, so like you're putting it all on the line, good for you. A lot of things in this talk are going to be really good, specific to your situation. How many of you are employed at very large companies but are really curious about entrepreneurship? Okay. Who are the rest of you? Recent college grads. Looking for jobs. Okay, Pivotal's hiring. Who else? Who has not raised their hand yet? What was that?
We're already at an established startup.
You're at an established startup. Okay, so how many people? 100 people? Okay, great, awesome. All right, so now let's figure out what you do. How many folks here are on the business side, are like, you know, sales, business development, marketing? Great. How many people are product management or a product management-like function? Yes, you're in the right place. Designers? Some. You're my heart. I love you. Anything I missed? Okay, good. Oh, right. This is a software company. We have software developers. How many software developers in the house? Even if you've already raised your hand once, but you still do software development, try it. Let me see. Awesome, great. Okay, so today I am going to, this is a very sort of philosophical level setting kind of talk. I want to talk to you about the practice of product management, but not from a how to do it standpoint. I want to give you some thoughts about how this field is evolving and changing, so that you can begin to approach your work kind of with an eye toward what opportunities you might need to open up in order to get your products into a really good space over the course of a year or 2 years or 4 years. Because this career that you're involved in is not going to be the same a year from now. This career that you're involved in happens to be at the focal point of some of the most profound change that's happening culturally in our world. I mean, the amount of change that is happening is astronomical, and it's only getting, that change rate is only getting faster, so our acceleration is accelerating. So you need to be prepared to have a different view a year from now than you do today. And that needs to become one of your core skills, is adapting to those changes that are happening around you. Okay, so I'm Janice Fraser. I am the director of the innovation practice at Pivotal. And somebody asked me earlier, like, what does that mean? And it's a good question. I have made a survey of people who have innovation in their title, and it means all sorts of things to all sorts of people. In my case, here's what it means. This is kind of a few of the milestones in my career. And I don't even really think of it as a career. This is just my life, right? In 1996, in January, about 6 months after their IPO, I joined Netscape. My first project was to work on the very first sort of proof of JavaScript's value. It was a 35,000 line JavaScript app to create a personalized interface to the web. So for those of you who were really very, very young, like 2 or 3 years old, in 1996 when I was doing this work, Netscape was the company that really brought the web into the public vernacular. Netscape was the internet for most people during that time. And so the few of us who were there then, we really felt like we were changing the world. And so I was very privileged, just by happenstance, to have been at this right place at the right time to find this life-changing work and to be engaged in that intellectual experience, trying to figure out how do we leverage this thing to make interesting, good things happen. That was really meaningful to me, and that really set a course for the next 20 years of my life. The next pivotal moment that I want to mention is about 4 years later. I joined with 6 other people to found a company. So lesson number 1, don't found a company with 7 people. We were very successful, but we were successful in spite of the size of our founding team, but also because of the people who were on that founding team. That company's Adaptive Path. And the thing to know about Adaptive Path is that when we started Adaptive Path, there was not a profession called user experience. So how many of you work now or have worked with user experience professionals? We were the first user experience company. Our biggest competition was called User Interface Engineering out of Boston. We were in San Francisco. And so it's not that we invented user experience, it's that we doubled down on it. We said, this is a really important component, and it is different here in these digital interfaces than it is in other places. And over time, some really amazing, profoundly influential design teams like Cooper and a company called Studio Archetype, all these companies kind of came on board with this way of thinking. But to be, for a second time, to have the privilege of being at this fulcrum moment where we were figuring something out that was going to make extraordinary change later, like that was really profoundly influential to me. So those designers, you're my heart because I come out of a design background. Then the next, fast forward 10 years, I'm practicing this craft. I become a real serial entrepreneur. I've started 6 companies as an entrepreneur myself. I've raised venture capital. There really are relatively few women at this point who have done that. And I realized that one of the things that was really broken were the business processes around how we take startups to market. And so I was very attracted to the idea of lean startup. How many of you are familiar with what lean startup stands for and what it means? Okay, I'm going to pretend that most of you understand it. It looks like about a third, maybe a quarter of the room does. Lean startup is super important. Probably those of you who aren't actually familiar with it are practicing some version of lean startup thinking. You just aren't aware of where it came from. Lean startup helped to, it's like the lean startup idea. A guy named Todd Park, he's the former CTO of the United States of America, 2-time startup founder. Both companies went public. Both of them valued over $1 billion at this point. He said when he read Eric's treatise on lean startup, he said it was like Eric had x-rayed his entrepreneur body and recognized every broken bone that he had ever experienced and told him what the answer should be. And that was like, it's like, yes, I know exactly the same thing. When I encountered lean startup, I was like, well, crap, no wonder that and that and that didn't work. Like, I did it all wrong. Like, it told me all the things that as a startup founder I had done wrong all the time. So we founded Luxor. We became one of the very first lean startup companies. What we were trying to do was help companies de-risk their startups very early on. We had 50 companies go through the accelerator program. We helped many, many others, including the founders of Lyft, which at the time was called Zimride, and TaskRabbit, and probably half a dozen others. Do you have Sprig out here yet? Probably not. Sprig is another one doing really well. And those moments helped me to really get my head around kind of how do we adapt to this rapid change that is only getting more and more accelerated because of all of you. There are 10,000 people participating in this Denver Startup Week. 10,000 people just here. Like, imagine what that's like when you add everybody in the United States, and then when you add everybody in China, and everybody in Europe. Like, you guys are changing everything about the way that we live. And so Lean Startup provided me with a framework for understanding how to adapt to that. Now what I want to do is tell you why I'm at Pivotal, and especially Pivotal Labs. Pivotal Labs is the company that I went to after receiving my very first venture capital check. It was 2007. I had a check for $250,000, and I went to the founder, Rob Mee, and I'm like, Rob Mee, here's my check. Will you build my thing for me? And he said, why, yes, here, read this book. And the book was Kent Beck, Extreme Programming Explained, 2nd edition. Every one of you must read this right now. You should leave right now, get out your phones, order it on Amazon. It is the best management book, chapters 1 through 7, best management book I have ever read in my life. And after the management part is done, after he talks about all the squishy human stuff, he talks about how to build software in a different way. Extreme Programming Explained, 2nd edition. Don't buy the 1st edition. So I'm at Pivotal because Pivotal Labs helped me figure out how to build great software. And the way that Pivotal and Pivotal Labs build software on the product and software development and design side matches so well with everything we did at Adaptive Path with user experience. And one of our heads of user experience is right here. There's another one in the back. And on the business side, Lean Startup, it's just these 3 things just connect together so well and so powerfully. And I felt like coming to Pivotal, I could have a much broader platform to say these things out loud for. So please do keep in touch. I think somebody in the back is live tweeting this. I'm Clever Girl everywhere on the internet. My slides are available at slideshare.net/clevergirl. Okay, are you ready for a gratuitous Venn diagram? Among other things, I am a consultant. Consultants must have a Venn diagram. What I want to say is that you in your lives, especially those of you who have chosen product as your job, as your career, your vocation, you're in the center of this. Product management, future, and Lean Startup. You live there. You live there. Because the future is going to happen on you, whether you're paying attention to it or not. So let's start with Lean Startup because it's the easiest one for me to explain. It's super simple. When I talk about Lean Startup, the very first thing about Lean Startup is that you have to empathize with your customers. You have to understand them. You have to know what their problems are, and you have to make sure that you're making a product that supports that. But it really, moreover, says you have to get super conscious about the risks inherent in your business because you've made assumptions that aren't actually proven. So you have to understand the product risks and the market risks, and you have to then decide which of those risks are most likely to be fatal to your future, to your company's future. And once you've figured out which ones are most important, you have to devise experiments that will give you evidence one way or the other. Because, oh my God, what happens if you start a video education company and it turns out that none of your students actually care about learning by video? That actually happens. So what we have to do is look very critically inside at our greatest, deepest, kind of what should be our fears, if we were conscious of them. And then we have to take small moves to prove or disprove these things and make adjustments based on what we learn. So that's Lean Startup. That's basically it in a nutshell. So then let's look at the future. The future is the thing that makes Lean Startup absolutely necessary. So the first thing, I'm going to start easy. The Internet of Everything. How many of you are involved in something that is the Internet of blah? Yeah, there are at least several of you here. All of our enterprise clients have some sort of industrial internet thing going on. It's like, here we're talking about connected cars, connected kitchens, connected homes, the Nest thermostat. Like, your gym socks are going to be connected to the gosh darn internet. It's just the way it is. But that's kind of the immediate present future. The other thing that's part of the immediate present future are these multi-part products and services, and I'm going to go through a couple of examples of those. Nothing is just an app. Nothing is just a website. Everything is an app and a website, and then a car drives to your house, and then they take something back, and then there's some huge thing going on. There are all these multi-touch point services, and so in that kind of environment, what is product? What does product mean? When you have 4 different touch points that together create a customer experience, is product really just the software? So then you have all these startups that have some kind of bizarrely complex supply chain on the back end. We'll talk about some of those as well. How many of you folks shop at Uniqlo, Zara, or H&M? Uniqlo, Zara, and H&M. These 3 clothing companies have revolutionized retail through their supply chains. That's optimizing a supply chain is what makes clothing startups like Everlane possible. So our startup community, our startup environment is going to include things that never before were part of startups. 10 years ago, 5 years ago, startups were just like, I'm going to make an app, and it's going to do this thing. 10 years ago, we didn't even have an iPad, right? 15 years ago, we didn't really have the iPhone. What year? Anybody remember exactly what year the iPhone came out? 2006. So it hasn't even been 10 years. Okay, so now I want to talk about some of the bizarre future stuff. I went to a conference called Foo Camp recently. Foo Camp is this 150 people camp out on the campus of O'Reilly and talk about stuff. It's an unconference. And the people who go there are like everybody from science fiction authors to futurists to whatever. And I'll tell you some of the things that they're talking about that are actually real. This is not fake. 3D printing of everything. Right? So Wired had a really great article about 3D printed prosthetics. They're beautiful. But so let's talk about the mass customization of prosthetics over the internet, and then you get your fake leg in the mail, and it fits. And you get it in 4 days. Like, what? Because of 3D printing technology, we now can do that? Okay, so now how about the 3D printed liver? A 3D printed living biological thing that has been transplanted into a human. Like, I don't even know what that means in terms of startup futures. Then you've got now 3D printed glass. So what would you do if someone could use technology in some way to create some custom 3D printed glass object? I have no idea. So 3D printing is not just like, the MakerBot. Like, so bizarre things are going to start happening. Okay, so now let's talk about embedded devices in your brain. It's called neural dust. They're these teeny tiny little things, and they get injected on a fabric of silk that then degrades, and they rest on your brain and allows you to control things with your brain. And scientists are doing this right now. So you think about companies like Lumosity. Have you heard about Lumosity? Right, Lumosity, like train your brain, like fix your alpha and theta waves. Like that is nothing. That is child's play compared to where we're going. Imagine the gaming enthusiasm if you could put the controller straight on your brain. Like, this stuff is happening right now. Not very well, but it's happening right now. Then I want you to think a little bit about the threats of the future. Today's threats, like I don't even know what the next threats are, right? I don't want to say that China's a threat, but there are a lot of people there, and they're inventing a whole lot of stuff right now because their economy has gone really well, even though recently it's a little. There's still 1 billion people thinking of cool stuff to do. That's a lot of people trying to think of cool stuff to do. So God forbid Google decide to enter your market. So there's this company, Dragon. Dragon is translation software. Like, so you speak into it, and it's like speech to text, and you had to train it, and it was kind of expensive. It was a few $100s. In September, Google just made that business completely obsolete. You talk into your computer, right? You click a button with a microphone on it, and it types what you're saying, and it's free. Okay, so when you have a whole fleet of programmers figuring out cool things to do, what is that going to do to the world we live in? And then there are all the other things, like all the things that are there. Drones. Google has acquired a company that makes like little boxes that are satellites so that your startup can like throw stuff onto a satellite and shoot it into space. And they're trying to figure out what to do with it. They're like, we can put a satellite into space for pretty much any purpose we want. But I think for you guys, the greatest threat, or maybe not threat, but the greatest challenge, is that you who are in the millennial generation think that you're defining your time. And that's true for another 4 years. The post-millennial generation, the 13-year-old kids, I have a 13-year-old boy, those kids think differently than you do. And I know this because I have an adopted 27-year-old daughter. And watching the difference between those two people is immense, is interesting. And it means that the future that you live in, you're going to need to adapt to their way of being. And that's going to change everything because they have never known a world where they didn't have all of the world's knowledge in their pocket 100% of the time. They have never known a world without it. And so now you ask your question, what expectations do they have of what is possible? What expectations do they have of what is possible? And not just what is possible, but what is so stupidly obvious, why hasn't anybody thought of it yet? So that's the context in which you are endeavoring to create a product right now. And the product decisions that you make today and tomorrow are going to come to market, and a year from now, all of this stuff might have changed everything that you know. So, how do you live in that reality? How do you build a career that has stability and a future, and where you're going to get a job next year, and the job after that, and the job after that? It's super exciting. Okay, so now let's talk about how product management is viewed today. So first thing, product managers keep things going. You do. God bless you. You make sure that things get shipped and that they're good and that they meet customer needs. In our parlance, in the parlance of Pivotal Labs, the way that we practice Agile development, which is extreme programming, we say we plan the epics, which are the big chunks of work, right? You sequence them out, you plan them out, and then you break those down into what we call user stories, which are teeny tiny increments of work that our developers can go through a backlog and just do their job, work on each story in turn, right? So write the user stories, and that's not a trivial thing. Then they have to accept or reject those user stories. Like, is this piece of work good enough, right? Is this the right thing? Does it meet the needs? Did I write the story well or poorly? Like, how do I judge the work that's been turned in by the developers? Okay, so this is a pretty straightforward job description. Then I call it data geekery. There are many kinds of data geekery landing on the PM's plate right now. Some of that data geekery is analysis, like A/B testing analysis, or analytics, Google Analytics analysis, or some of our other analysis tools. But there's also data science geekery, right? So sometimes we have to start working with data scientists. I probably should have put that on our future. Like, there's going to be a data scientist on pretty much every team in this room at some point, because the world is data-driven now for all those reasons. So the words that I use to describe, or that I've heard used to describe product managers, are these. They're the pace setter. They keep things moving. They're the glue. They hold everything together. They're very pragmatic. The one I want to point out is the decider. So there was a very famous article written by Ben Horowitz, who's one of the partners in Andreessen Horowitz, super important, super influential VC firm. Every one of you wants your startup to be funded by Andreessen Horowitz. Absolutely gold standard. Ben Horowitz wrote an article that I have disagreed with from day one. That article said, as the product manager, you should be acting like the CEO of your own little product startup. And the truth is, that's not helpful. Because, in truth, CEOs really shouldn't be making all the decisions by fiat. That just doesn't work. We can talk about that a different day. That's another topic. But really, what the product manager needs to do is find out the right thing to move us forward. So that doesn't mean I have the power, I have the authority, I'm going to make the call, boom, right? That's my job. Which is kind of how Ben Horowitz's article, which was longer and more thoughtful than that, but that's kind of how it was taken. I am the owner of this product. It is my decision to make. I don't care what you user experience people think. I don't care what sales need. This is my decision. I'm going to make the call. That's not helpful. It doesn't advance the cause. It doesn't get you any closer, any faster. It might get you to write code faster, but it doesn't help you know whether that code is right. So I'm going to talk now about some examples of the kinds of complicated, interesting product spaces that exist in today's world. This is a company called Madison Reid. You can find out more about it on AngelList or any number of startup-related websites. Madison Reid is interesting because it is a web-based startup with a mobile application that is revolutionizing hair color. So if I had to say, what is one of the things that does not at all lend itself to an online application with a mobile app, it would be dyeing my hair. And if any of you have ever tried to dye your hair in your bathroom, don't do that unless you hire Madison Reid. But you get this box of dye off of the shelf at your drugstore, and you're like, do I buy this kind or that kind? And then you bring it home, and then you get the dark line around your face right here, and you're like, and everything gets stained, and you have to wear a crappy t-shirt, right? None of that speaks of, I know, let's make an internet startup. That's awesome. So instead, what they've done is they've taken all the toxins out. They've reformulated. They worked with a chemist. So they have this suite of colors, and you can book a colorist to come to your house and apply the color that you choose. So you buy it online. There's a color picker. There's a consultation kind of thing. right? You buy it online, you use your mobile booker app, and then they come and they put the color on your hair for you, and it's much less expensive than going to a salon. Now, what I want to ask you is, what's the product? Which part of that is the product? All of it, absolutely. This is something that in the design industry, when you go to get a master's degree in this, it's called service design. And really, service design is going to take us into the future. We may or may not ever call it service design, but the truth is that the experience, the decision about whether or not this is a valuable product to me relies on how good is the color. So that's all about the chemistry. How good is the colorist who comes to my house? How convenient is it? Does the app work as it should? Am I choosing the right color when I go on the website? They have a phone-in kind of advice line. Does that advice line deliver in a timely way the kind of advice that helps me to be really happy with the whole thing? That gestalt, that collection of things, that is all the product. And so when you think about that description of what product management is, how do you write a backlog for that? There are new organizational challenges that are coming out of these innovative product concepts that are going to force us to rethink how we structure our work, what the purpose of our work is, and how we're going to move forward as a team. And this is why it's not appropriate to think of the product manager as just the one person who gets to decide all the things because they're on the hook for delivering the backlog. This has to involve a greater collaboration across multiple functions. Okay, so now I want to talk about this. Last year I had a different, when I originally gave this talk a year ago, and I had a different example of this. This is just the newest one. So how do men make fashion decisions, and how do men acquire their sartorial accoutrement? This is a new one. It is Italian luxury, right? For less, delivered to you in batches, right? So the idea here is that they have, like Everlane. How many of you are familiar with Everlane? Is that a useful? Okay, Everlane is what kind of the vanguard of this. Let's simplify the supply chain and the delivery of the shirt. So what they've done is taken all of the complexity and all of the middlemen out of the shirt manufacturing and delivery process. So you buy your shirt online, and it is made very efficiently, so they can charge less. There's a little bit more transparency. Everlane has radical transparency in how they achieve their pricing. And then they deliver it to your door. So again, what is the product? There's the buying experience. There's the returns experience. I want you to notice this one word up here, subscribe. How do you subscribe, and what is the value of subscribing to a shirt? What is the value of subscribing to many shirts? How often should they arrive? The product experience that you're going to have of this is putting a shirt on every morning. But as a product manager, the job that we described for you at the beginning was to organize the backlog. So not only does this have a very complex kind of rethinking, it's a simplified supply chain, but it's a complex rethinking of an established industry, but it also has this multi-part service design aspect to it. And the product experience happens in the morning when you're putting on your shirt, or when you receive the package and you're like, God, I don't really need another shirt. Should I unsubscribe? Like all of that goes into this particular startup. Now here, this is maybe my favorite. This is a company called Bevel. They're razors made specifically for African American skin. And it's a resolution to a problem that I certainly had no idea existed, but it's been extremely successful. The parent company has raised a lot of money to continue rolling out products like this. So it's a reinvention of the razor. So there are a lot of bourgeois kinds of shaving. Dollar Shave Club is the shave delivery system, but then you've got the Art of Shaving, which has their mall stores. So it's certainly on trend with all of those things, but it's narrowing down that trend to be specifically solving a problem for a community that didn't really have a solution on the market. Okay, so very elegant, very nicely packaged. What I want to point out here is this: membership has its benefits. So again, it's a subscription. Fine, great. We have lots of subscription services for personal care. Great. That's not what's interesting here. What's really interesting here is consultations, concierge, content, and products. So not only is their product razors, not only is their product skincare products, not only is their product the convenience of having all of your shaving needs arrive in a monthly box, kind of like Birchbox, but it's also help. Right? The problem they're solving are razor bumps, which evidently are a big problem for African American men using multi-bladed razors. Who knew? I had no idea. And so what they have, they're offering one-on-one video or phone calls. So let's think about the technology implications of that. Yes, you could outsource it, whatever. A lot of those outsourcing, services, A, they're really expensive, and B, sometimes they're not as reliable, and C, you don't really want like some random person out, in Asia answering the phone call. What you want is someone who can actually relate to the specific instance and can give you meaningful advice. So again, my question to you here is, which part of this is the product? All right, and my last example. Lolly Wally Doodle. This is a crazy company. Crazy. Let me tell you how this company works. Have any of you in this room ever heard of Lolly Wally Doodle? Yes, one. Have you ever bought anything from Lolly? All right. Lolly Wally Doodle, if you are, there are other parts of the country where this is huge. So let me tell you how Lolly decides. It's an apparel company, started primarily for children's apparel, girls' apparel, but now it's like mom and daughter kinds of things, and it's like expanded its product line. Every day, 17 to 20 samples of garments are made. Every day, 17 to 20 sample garments are made and posted on Facebook. And the ones that get the most likes over the course of the day are put into production. And then when their production runs are made available, they're made available through Facebook, and you buy through comments. Buy, size 12, pink. That's it. That's how you buy things on Lolly. And then all of the okay, let's transact that business. They did like $100 million in their first couple years. $100 million. I want that startup. Let me tell you. But what do you have to change in order to be able to put out 17 sample garments every single day? That is bananas. Right? So they've got people inventing, look at what that girl's wearing. People are inventing crazy ass stuff and putting it online and just seeing hey, let's see what goes. When you think about how retail is done now, the way that retail is done now is that twice a year, all the designers, even the ones for children, put a bunch of sample garments down the runway, and all the buyers of the big retail chains, except for the 3 I mentioned at the beginning, of the big retail chains, they decide which ones are good, and they order in bulk, and they distribute them, all of these goods out into the world to their retail stores, and then a bunch of them aren't purchased, and then they're returned, and then you have waste. Now let's think about how we reduce waste. We do experiments. I make one garment, I put it on the internet, I put it in with a bunch of other things, and so I get a real good sense of these are great and those are not. That's bananas thinking. And I love this example because it shows the combination of, is that marketing? Is that product? Is that your fashion person? What is that? This is a use of technology that I think blows away all of the conventional startups that I see. So I'm sure, I have not gotten deep information on the back end, but I am sure that their fulfillment process, the transaction engine and the fulfillment engine, super software enabled. So repeating that question, what is the product here? What I also want to add to that is how does technology make this a viable startup? How does technology make this something that can scale to $50 million in the first year? I don't know exactly how much the second year was, but it's way over $50 million. So as a product manager, when you're thinking about what it means to be a product manager and you start putting yourself into these shoes, you're like, whoa, this is more than just organizing a backlog and writing a good user story. I have to think about things differently. So I work at Pivotal. Pivotal Labs, absolutely, in my view, the best software development shop in the world. No question about it. And I don't say that, I say that as a customer, which is why I came to work for them. And they practice Agile, and we practice XP, the version of Agile. And I think it is absolutely a beautiful thing. But a product manager in an Agile environment, while organizing the backlog is a really important thing, the job is actually bigger than that. The job is not just a mechanical job, although there are mechanical aspects to everything that we all do. The job is bigger than that. So we have to figure out what that job is. So in order to figure out what that job is, here's what I want to give to you. This is one of the most important quotes in my entire career. So this comes from Kent Beck, Extreme Programming Explained. And here's what he says. The courage to speak truths, pleasant or unpleasant, fosters communication and trust. So think about that in terms of all of these really harebrained experimental startups that we talked about. Think about Lolly Wally Doodle, right? Think about Dollar Shave Club. Think about Bevel. The courage to speak truths, pleasant or unpleasant, fosters communication and trust. This means that as a product manager, if you tell the truth with the other people next to you and you go like, what we're doing isn't working, you actually now have an opportunity to do something that does work. But if everybody's afraid of saying that hard thing, then nobody can make progress. It becomes an invisible barrier to progress, in fact. So it is our obligation to the team as a service to have the courage to say difficult things. Now, so the courage to actually discard failing solutions and seek new ones encourages simplicity. This is super true in software. As a software developer, you do want to do this. And what I want to say is that as a product manager, you must do this. You have to help the team have the courage to say, that thing that we're doing isn't working. We should stop doing it. And that's really hard. So there's a startup called TaskRabbit. It's raised a lot of funding. It's been around for about 7 years. And at one point, they were trying to figure out, they really hadn't had product market fit yet, and they're trying to figure out how do we increase the number of transactions. And they started this is before all the delivery services. They're like, we're going to bring burgers to your door every day at noon. So they had this like one button app, this app, you just press a button to get a burger. That was it. Press a button to get a burger, we'll deliver it to your door. It was a really interesting, cute little experiment. They ran it for 3 months. They thought it could be the future of their company, and they were wrong. But somebody on the product side had to have the courage to go like, this is an experiment, it did not go well, we're not going to do it anymore. Somebody had to have the courage to shut it down. And there's always going to be somebody when you do that that goes like, but we've invested so much time in it, we've invested so much money, and that is the myth of sunk cost. Sunk cost does not matter. It's what will it get you in the future. So the final sentence here, the courage to seek real, concrete answers creates feedback. What this means to me is that as a product manager, I want you to go and sit down with somebody and look them in the eye and say, tell me how that went for you. Tell me what you think could make it better. And have the courage to let them tell you things that make you uncomfortable. Because your job is not to be right. It is not possible for you to be right all the time. That is an unreasonable expectation that we have. It's this myth of business, is that the best employees are the ones that only do things that are right. That will not get you up to speed with the pace of change that's confronting our industry. So having this level of courage, okay, so I just want you to notice, this whole set of statements is in a software development book. Like, how badass is that? Who knew, those among you who are software developers, you already did, but who knew that software developers were so philosophical? So here's what this says. This says that as product managers, we have to embrace leadership. We have to view ourselves as leaders, not owners. Leaders help to get the right thing to happen. They help to shepherd kind of the collective effort in a good direction, but they do not dictate what that right thing is. So it's leadership, not ownership. So I got this one from the TV show House a long time ago. It's differential diagnosis, not process implementation. So let me tell you about differential diagnosis. Differential diagnosis says, hey, there's a patient. This patient has something wrong with them. It doesn't fit any one thing that we can identify. There's no like, oh, there's your problem. So we have to go say, what are all the things that might have this effect, and what are all the things that might have that effect, and which two of those might explain the story? That's a really interesting problem-solving model. And that's what I want you to think about. So because change is so inevitable, and it's happening so fast, and because you're doing extraordinarily bold things that have never been done before, because that's pretty much what a startup is, right? You're doing unknowable things. You're going to be wrong a lot of the time. The world is going to change underneath you. Competitors will come out of the woodwork. Suddenly, your performance, some metric that you count on, isn't doing what it's supposed to. It's not enough to go like, I know what the answer is. We've got to go do this. What you have to say is, what are the things that might have this effect? What are the things that have changed recently? And you have to start looking for the intersections that are interesting, that might give you a real advantage as you begin to figure out what the solution might be. So differential diagnosis over process implementation. Group facilitation over heroism. So this is one of those things that in the Agile software development world we have successfully wiped out. This desire to be the rock star developer, right? Or the unicorn guru designer. Or the mini CEO product manager, right? None of us needs to be a hero. What we need to be are good participants in a team dialogue that gets the right thing to happen every day without drama forever. It's no problem, right? It turns out humans need to be taught how to do this, but we can do it. We can do it, and I know we can do it because I watch it happen every single day at Pivotal. Right? And I actually have been privileged to work on teams that were able to work this way. Things go right or wrong. You figure out what you did that made that happen. You do that figuring out together in partnership, intellectual partnership with the other people on your team. You devise a new next step forward based on all of that thinking and learning. You do it very quickly, and you don't have drama. And the not having drama happens in part because we stop acting like heroes. So I used to describe designers as liking to go into their designer's cave. I mean, we go into our designer's cave, we're like, look, no, don't look, don't look. I'll bring it to you when I'm done, right? And we think things through all the way to the end. And we deliver a complete system that we have in our brains imagined at the nth detail. I'm not talking about you, really. I know you would never do that. We think it all the way through, all the way down to all the details, and we present it as a fait accompli. Look at the beautiful thing that I've made. Worship at my feet. We don't actually say that out loud, but that's what's in our heads. The same is true with developers. I'm going to go home. I'm going to stay till midnight. I'm going to stay up till 2 in the morning. I'm going to code this thing. And you're going to come in, and you're going to be totally blown away by how awesome I was. So both of these examples are about people working in an information silo, trying to save the world. And what happens is they break the collaboration that's so meaningful and so important in figuring out what to do next. What we need is to pair. We need our programmers to work side by side. We need our product managers to solve problems in partnership with the people who know our customer, the people who know the data best, our data scientists. If you're lucky enough to have a data scientist, hold on to them. So, right, and your business owners, kind of the CEO of the company or your new business lead, right? All of this has to come together so you are stewarding a team through a thought process to make the right thing happen as often as possible, to recover from the wrong things, treating every problem as an intellectual challenge, solving that challenge together, not making it personal, not making it about whether or not you're valuable enough or he's valuable enough or she's valuable enough, but really just making it happen. And, and that's enough about heroism. So as product managers, it's really important that you're experienced makers. I think product managers need to not just be, MBAs. There was a trend, there has been a trend, particularly in Silicon Valley, for the product managers to be very well trained, which means they got an MBA from Haas or Stanford. And now they're product people. And that's not enough. We need people who are really going to be in there in the trenches. I have often, kind of in my startups, made my product managers take programming classes on the side so that they understand what a development environment is, so that they understand what it is they're asking of their developers, so that they understand a lot of these things. Many product managers already come from a user experience side. I love product managers that have user experience backgrounds because they understand how to ask questions, how to do user experience interviews, like that sort of thing. So having some grounding in making something, anything, is super important because it helps your decision making, it helps your stewardship of the product be more realistic, more rooted. It helps you even more, probably most importantly, to be empathetic with the people that you're collaborating with. And when we understand each other, we reduce that drama. Pragmatic, not dogmatic. So I have a strong point of view about the way the world should work. I believe in XP. I believe in lean startup. I believe in user experience. But in the moment, there will be times when instead of everybody who's taken a workshop from me knows, pull out your Post-it notes and your Sharpie pen. Like sometimes you just let it go. And you just do the thing that's going to be most effective. So Pivotal has a very small set of corporate values. Do the right thing, do what works, be kind. And here what I'm talking about is, yes, have a strong point of view, but then do the right thing and do the thing that works. This is my final point. I want you to think about the whole business. All of these startups that I mentioned today are complex. They're trying to rethink something more profoundly than just, a web app or a mobile app. They're more complicated with more touch points. You're going to have to work on pricing and fulfillment and the customer experience when my handy cleaner comes to clean my house. All of those things go into what it means to be a product company, a product-driven company, a customer-centric company. So I put the picture of the cupcake here because cupcake is one of my touchstones. The MVP, which is lean startup jargon for your first experiment, the MVP for a wedding cake is a cupcake. It is a small, perfectly formed representation of a much larger, more complex value proposition that allows you to get real information from real people in the real world so that you can validate some of your riskiest assumptions. So as you think about, as a product, when you have your product manager's hat on and you're thinking about the whole business, you can think, what would be the cupcake of this pricing strategy? What would be the cupcake of this value chain, supply chain? So think cupcake, not wedding cake. And that's going to be my final word. We have more time. We're going to probably ask people to, we're going to stick around for about 20 minutes, ask and answer questions. At that point, we have to change the room, so we'll let you know when that happens. But we have 20 minutes, and I would love to take questions and have a conversation. So thank you. What is the coolest technology that I'm excited about? So I am probably the worst person to ask that question of because I have lived through 20 years of trends and things coming and going and whatnot. So I'm kind of, have you ever seen Crossing the Chasm? There's the adoption chasm. I'm the first person on the far side of the chasm. So, I don't even know what right now, I would say it's the Amazon Fire Stick. Who knew that I would go through TiVo and then Apple TV, or Netflix and Apple TV, and really my favorite of all of them is Amazon Fire Stick. And I have to say, the best business model ever invented on the planet is Amazon Prime. Amazon and Google and Apple, they own me, 100%. And I don't really want to be owned by any of them. So it's a little bit, uncomfortable. So as you're trying to figure out what the perfect product is, how do we balance out the economic questions? This is a set of concerns that is valid. It's addressed by a lot of the people who have written about lean startups. So some people have a very strong opinion about the sequence. My particular opinion about the sequence is that you need to do kind of baseline price testing, business model testing, et cetera, early on. Presume that you will learn more later, but you have to take a stab at it. But that really the most important thing to get right first is problem solution fit. Is there a person who has a problem that I can solve? Right? So I tend not to be involved in entertainment type products where the mechanics are slightly different than that. Most of the stuff I'm involved in is utility based somehow. It's like enhancing people's lives by making it more convenient or faster or whatever. So person, problem, solution, I call that the molecule. You change one of those, you change everything else. So once you get that right, then you can really double down on learning about product market fit, which is, are there enough people? Is the price economic, the cost economics going to work? How do you optimize the cost side? How do you optimize the margin side? Like all of those questions. The thing is, you don't want to go into depth optimizing those things until you've basically got your value proposition proven. So that's my opinion. There are other opinions. I like Ash Maurya, so if you haven't read the Ash Maurya book, I would advise that. It's called, I don't remember the name of it. What was that?
What was the book again?
I don't remember the name of it. It's Ash, A-S-H is the first name, Maurya, M-A-U-R-I-Y-A, Maurya. Where does product management stop and UX begin? Because there can be a lot of overlap. And actually, product management can overlap with a lot of different things. I think that the actual technical negotiation, that specific negotiation happens within each team. It's going to depend on the experience, the skill set, the maturity, all of those factors. The way that I like to approach that question is actually, what are the functions? I think that the most important job function of the user experience person is to, at a professional level, deeply understand the needs of the customers so that you can prioritize which customer needs might be high value enough to create a company around it. To represent that in product concepts and designs, right? So that's a professional skill. The product manager has more of a horizontal function. Their job is to understand the lay of the land, understand all the competing priorities that go into making a product happen, and to sometimes make very hard decisions in the face of inadequate data to make a fact-based decision. So when you look at it from those two roles point of view, the point of conflict where decision actually matters is who's the right person to make this decision in this moment. And so sometimes it's going to be that person who has that deep vertical expertise, that really kind of, this is my life's work, I'm going to just do this. Sometimes it's going to be the person who sees the wide range of conflicting priorities. So, I believe that it's usually the product manager who allocates that decision-making authority. But they do it as a service to the team, not as a royal decree. If they go about it not in the cupcake kind of way, they go and try and make the wedding cake, what do we see? And I have a whole talk about that. It's awesome. Basically what happens is that all of the decisions that you make that you do not yet validate by putting real product in the hands of real people in the real world, you're building risk. So you risk launching your product on a mountain of uncertainty because you haven't validated any of that. So what you get is a higher risk that that product will not have the impact that you want it to have. So you risk failure. And what you want is, the phrase fail fast is very popular right now. I don't actually like to say fail fast. I want to say learn fast. I have this idea. Let's go find out if it's true. And you do that in a couple weeks, not 6 months, right? I had one startup that I made that I literally did not launch for a year. A year. It was dumb. I should have launched it in a couple weeks. And, this is why I've had 6 startups, I've got to tell you, because when you do that many, some of them go well, some of them not so well. So what you want is to learn these things as quickly as you can, and that allows you to make really bold moves. Like, what if I only charge $2, right? Oh, okay, that didn't actually have the effect I thought it would. So it's not price that's causing people to not buy my product. So if you take this experiment-based approach, you can learn a lot of things really fast, always in service to that higher order goal that you're trying to get to, right? So, this approach means that you're experimenting to achieve your vision. In a complex business, like some of the ones I was talking about, where you have a lot of components to the product experience, in the early stages, you're going to use human processes, right, to do that. We call it Wizard of Oz, right? You're going to Wizard of Oz a lot of stuff. And how do you consider scaling? And here you get to some of the price expense side questions, right? How do you know you're going to have a viable business model, right? Because you know that the way you're experimenting in the early days is not going to be scalable financially. That is totally fine. So premature scaling used to kill 90% of businesses because they would go for the big splash that would get them their next round of investment without ever validating their product, the value proposition with their customer. And so you get all these customers, but they don't stick with you because you haven't found problem solution fit. All you know is what I call success theater, right? So I would say don't worry about scaling until you know that you have something that's valuable enough to somebody else to pay money for it. And then you can figure out, how much money can I get for this? And then you can figure out, okay, how can I reduce cost? Some business models actually begin with, I'm going to change my back end. And so then you do as little on the front end as possible. You see if those back end mechanics can work, right? Whatever your kind of big assumptions are, you got to validate those right away. Sometimes the big assumption is technical risk. Right? So the satellite company that I was talking about that makes these they're literally 1 foot square or something like this, and you can shoot them into space and they're satellites and they're kind of cheap and you can it's like you can rent server space on a satellite more or less, mind blowing. So they had a lot of technical risk that they had to prove first. They don't really know what to apply it to, but that's okay, right? This is a technology play. Most of what we're doing are not pure tech plays. So rapid prototyping techniques, I actually don't think in terms of prototypes, I'm sorry to say. And I used to be a prototyping machine. I would paper prototype things, whatever. I really frame everything now as experiments. And sometimes the experiments are about creating a cupcake, right? An actual product that validates some set of assumptions, like is it delicious? Is it beautiful, right? But sometimes those experiments are a Facebook ad that I do 10 different versions of because I want to know what the price is that I want to validate. Sometimes, so there's a company called Instacart. I don't know if you have Instacart here yet. The founder of Instacart, reportedly, I haven't validated this straight from his mouth, but the founder of Instacart stood outside of Whole Foods when he was thinking of this idea and said, look, if I were to buy you a cup of coffee, you could go next door, you give me your grocery list, would you let me buy your groceries for you? Would that be okay with you? And because his biggest question was, will people let somebody else, a stranger, buy their groceries for them, from a supermarket? And the answer was, yeah, sure. And so, he's now built up quite a large business out of that. And so that's not a prototype. But it is an experiment that validates critical assumptions, and it is also an approximation of the service that they would get. You get to rest, I do your grocery shopping for you, super convenient, right? So that's called concierge MVP. There are patterns in how these experiments can work. The first one I talked about was a smoke test, the bunch of Facebook ads. The second one is the concierge MVP. There's also a Wizard of Oz MVP, where we show an apparently kind of mature front end, but it's all sneaker net on the back and it's all humans doing the work, right? That's Wizard of Oz. So there are these different tiers of getting learning about the question that you have. Having been sort of kind of one, I have a very deep and broad history with them. I think that they serve some purposes. I think that they're not as helpful as some people might expect them to be. Certainly they're going to help you figure out how to tell the story, get your story straight so that you can pitch for funding. If you're in a good one, you're going to get the benefit of a space to work and some exposure to really good advisors and mentors. You should take full advantage of that. I think sometimes the best value you get out of them is the network that you get with other entrepreneurs who can look you in the eye and go like, yeah, this shit is really hard. Like seriously, being an entrepreneur is really hard. If I can talk you out of that lifestyle, I will. And that's from somebody who was addicted to it, and I keep doing it, so I certainly am guilty of it myself. It's incredibly rewarding, but it's a very difficult way to make a living. And if you're in it to get rich, it's really a lot easier to get a job on Wall Street. Like seriously, like you're gonna get rich more predictably getting a job that pays you $300,000 a year. So I think that's all that we have time for. Thank you all so much. This is really a pleasure.